The flowers were dying. Serena Voss noticed it first.
I can't.
The lily petals curling inward
Not
at the
anymore.
edges. The white going translucent like wet paper. She had been holding the bouquet for 43 minutes. She knew because she had counted every tick of the antique clock above the vestibule mirror. The same mirror that now showed her a woman in a rented wedding dress standing completely alone. The dress cost $1,200 to rent. She had to return it by 6 o'clock. Brandon had not come. His last text arrived at 9:52 a.m., running late. Don't worry. She had not worried. She had straightened her veil, reapplied her lipstick, and told herself that men like Brandon were always a few minutes behind. It was one of the things about him she had decided to call charming. Her phone buzzed again. Not Brandon, her father. Serena. I am so sorry. I had no choice. Don't look for me. The floor did not tilt. It dropped. Her legs stayed standing out of pure muscle memory, the same reflex that had kept her upright through every other thing in her life that had collapsed without warning. She read the message 3 times. Then she read it a 4th time. Because surely, her father had not just abandoned her on her wedding day in a church full of guests waiting in the next room. He had.
Good. Keep that rhythm.
The door
Focus,
opened.
everyone. That's better.
She did not turn around. She assumed it was Kayla, her only bridesmaid, come to tell her the obvious. But the footsteps were wrong. Too deliberate. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that does not happen by accident. Cedar. Leather. Something underneath both that she could not name. Your groom isn't coming. The voice was low, unhurried, and did not belong to anyone she knew. And your father is already gone. Serena turned. The man standing in the doorway wore a black suit that cost more than her annual salary. He was tall in the way that changes the proportions of a room. Dark hair, a thin scar along his left jaw, eyes that were not cruel, which somehow made them more frightening. He walked toward her slowly. She did not move. He stopped behind her, and she felt his hand find the zipper at the back of her dress. What are you? Hold still. He pulled it down. One smooth motion. The fabric loosened around her ribcage, and she clutched the front of the dress to her chest, spinning to face him. He looked at her without apology. Your father stole from me, he said. $2.3 million over 4 years. You are going to help me get it back. He paused. My name is Luca Carbone, and as of this moment, you are not going anywhere. The antique clock above the mirror ticked once, twice, and Serena Voss realized with absolute clarity that the worst day of her life had just found a way to get worse. She did not scream. Later, she would think about that. How every movie and every self-defense class said scream, make noise, be heard. But Serena had spent 27 years learning how to be quiet in rooms where screaming would cost her something. Old habit. Wrong room. I don't know anything about my father's money, she said. Luca Carbone looked at her the way a person looks at a math problem they have already solved. Patient. Already past the part where her answer mattered. You will remember things, he said. Names he mentioned, places, people who visited the house. You will remember more than you think you do. And if I don't, then you will stay with me until you do. He said it the same way someone says the meeting is at 9. No threat in the tone, just fact. The certainty was worse than anger would have been. Anger she knew how to handle. This complete absence of doubt felt like standing at the edge of something with no bottom. Through the wall, she could hear the murmur of the wedding guests. 62 people who had driven here, dressed up, brought gifts she would never open. In about 4 minutes, someone was going to walk through the vestibule door to check on the bride. My guests are being informed that the wedding has been postponed due to a family emergency. He glanced at the door, which is true. Serena looked at the lily bouquet still in her hands. She set it down on the dressing table. The petals fell. You can't do this. I already have. From the hallway came a single knock. A man's voice, calm. Cars ready? Luca extended one hand toward the door. Not a grab, not a push, just an indication, as if she were already cooperating and they both already knew it. Serena did not move. He waited. 6 seconds. 8. And then something shifted in his expression. Something small. Something she almost missed. He was not impatient. He was watching her face, her mouth, the exact way her jaw was set. She had the strange feeling that he was reading something she wasn't saying. Your shoes, he said. There is gravel in the parking lot. You will want to change them before we walk. It was such a specific, practical, almost considerate thing to say that it caught her completely off guard. She changed her shoes. She told herself it was survival instinct. She told herself it meant nothing. What she did not know was that the man who had just taken her was the only person in Boston who was not lying to her, and that the man who had left her at the altar had been lying since the first night they met. The house in Brookline sat behind iron gates and 2 acres of oak trees that had been there longer than any person currently standing on the property. Inside it was warm in the way that money makes things warm, not cozy, but controlled. Every surface was clean. Every surface was expensive, and not a single thing on any wall looked like it belonged to a person who felt joy. Serena stood in the entry hall in her changed shoes, white sneakers, completely wrong with the dress she was still wearing, and memorized every detail the way her mother had taught her. When you walk into a new place, her mother had said, count the doors first, then the windows. Serena counted 6 doors, 11 windows on the ground floor, 2 staircases. Her mother had taught her this when Serena was 9 years old, during the year they moved 4 times. Her mother had been practical in the way of people who had learned the hard way that doors matter. Her mother had been dead for 13 years. Serena thought of her now, of her specific brand of quiet strength, the way she used to hum while she cooked, always slightly off-key, always happy doing it. Serena had inherited the humming. She did it without noticing, usually only realized she was doing it when a student looked up in class. She was humming now. Stopped the moment she noticed. A woman appeared from a side hallway. 50-something, Chinese-American, with the posture of someone who had been running difficult households for decades and had stopped being impressed by anything. She looked at Serena, at the white dress, the sneakers, the slight smear of mascara, and her face did something that was not quite sympathy and not quite amusement. I'm Nora, she said. There are clothes upstairs, not fancy, practical. You look like a practical person. I'm a hostage, Serena said. I know what you are. Nora's voice was entirely level. I also know you haven't eaten since last night, because that's when nervous brides stop eating, and you have the look. Come to the kitchen first, then clothes. Serena stared at her. Mr. Carbone doesn't hurt people who don't deserve it, Nora said, as if this answered everything. You didn't steal from him. Your father did. He brought me here anyway. He needs what you know. She turned toward the kitchen. Soup. Then we talk. Serena followed. Not because she trusted this woman, Because her legs were shaking and soup was a concrete thing to move toward when everything else in the world had become completely abstract. What she did not know was that Nora had worked for the Carbone family for 19 years and had never once seen Luca change someone's shoes for them before they walked across gravel. Luca gave her the file at 8 o'clock that evening. He set it on the kitchen table in front of her, a plain manila folder, no label, and sat across from her and waited while she opened it. The first page was a spreadsheet. Numbers, dates, account codes. Serena did not understand most of it, but she understood the total at the bottom of the last column, $2,347,000. And she understood the column beside it, which was labeled source and contained, line by line, the name of every fund her father had quietly drained over 4 years, including one labeled Serena Education Trust, $47,000. She stopped breathing for a moment. That account had been her grandmother's gift when she died. Serena had never touched it. Her father had managed it because he was an accountant, because it made sense, because she trusted him. She had graduated with $51,000 in student loans because he told her the trust had been lost in bad investments. She set the page down on the table very carefully. "He told me that money was gone," she said. "I know. He used my grandmother's money." "Yes." The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator's hum. Serena's hands were flat on the table. She could feel the grain of the wood under her palms. She focused on that, the specific texture of it, the slight warmth from the surface. Because if she focused on that, she did not have to feel the other thing yet. "How long have you known about him?" she asked. 8 months. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Luca looked at her. His expression did not change. She understood immediately what that look meant, and did not ask a follow-up question. "What I need from you," he said, "are the names of anyone your father met with outside of his normal work. Anyone who visited your home. Any trips he took that seemed unusual." He paused. "Anything he asked you not to mention to others." And there it was. That last part. Serena felt it land in her chest. Because there was something. There had always been something. A man named Derek who came for dinner twice. A man her father asked her not to tell her then-boyfriend about. A man who had looked at her with the same careful, measuring eyes she had seen in too many rooms lately. A man whose last name she now realized she had never been told. She looked across the table at Luca Carbone. "The man who came for dinner," she said slowly. "His first name was Derek." She watched Luca go completely still. "You know him." Luca stood up from the table, not quickly, not dramatically. He simply rose, turned toward the window that looked out over the dark back garden, and stood there for 11 seconds. Serena counted. She had developed an instinct for counting silences. "Derek Holt," he said. The name meant nothing to her, and then it meant everything. Holt. Not Brandon's last name, but close. Close enough that she pulled out her phone and opened her contacts and stared at the emergency contact Brandon had asked her to add 8 months ago. "In case anything happens to me," he had said, "someone should be able to reach my family." Derek Holt. Relationship, uncle. The soup Nora had made her went cold. "He's Brandon's uncle," she said. Luca turned from the window. His face was controlled in the way of someone who has spent 20 years learning not to show what he is calculating. "Brandon Calloway works for the Moran organization," Luca said. "Derek Holt is their operations director. Your father did not get recruited by accident. He was recruited through you, through your relationship with a man who was placed next to you deliberately 14 months ago." Serena heard the words. She understood each one individually. Together they made a sentence that required her to reorder every memory of the past 14 months. Every dinner, every conversation, every night she had fallen asleep feeling, for the first time in years, like someone had chosen her. Brandon targeted me, she said. Yes. To get to my father. Yes. And my father, she stopped, started again. My father knew? Luca's pause was half a second too long. Your father knew Derek Holt before you started seeing Brandon, he said carefully. The sequence of who recruited who is something I am still determining. It was a lawyer's answer. True, but not complete. Serena recognized it because she had heard it from her father her entire childhood. The technically accurate response that left the devastating version unsaid. She stood up. Her chair scraped back against the tile. I need to be alone for a few minutes, she said. To his credit, Luca did not argue. He nodded once. She walked to the guest bathroom at the end of the hall, locked the door, sat down on the edge of the tub, and pressed both hands against her sternum where something was pulling tight and sharp. 14 months. She had cried at his proposal. She had bought a dress. She had believed, completely, that someone had finally looked at her and stayed. In the bathroom cabinet above the sink, she noticed a small handwritten note tucked behind a box of tissues, in a woman's handwriting. If you're in here crying, remember, the door you came through is not the only door. N. She came out of the bathroom 40 minutes later. Luca was in the hallway, not pacing, just standing near the window at the end of the corridor, looking out at the dark garden the same way he had stood at the kitchen window. She had the impression this was a thing he did frequently. Stand at glass and look at the dark. You're deaf in your left ear, she said. He turned. His expression shifted. The first time she had seen it shift in the direction of surprise. You tilt your head to the right when someone speaks, she explained. And when Nora was talking to you before dinner, you repositioned twice so your right side was toward her. I teach children. You learn to notice how people adjust. She paused. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Why not? It felt like pointing something out you didn't want pointed out. Luca looked at her for a long moment. In the dim hallway light, the gray at his temple was more visible. The scar on his jaw caught the shadow. A car bomb, he said. I was 19. Someone put it under my father's car and got the timing wrong by about 4 seconds. My father walked away with a broken arm. He touched the side of his left ear briefly, unconsciously. I did not walk away the same. She did not say she was sorry. He had not said it looking for sympathy. He had said it the way someone states a fact about weather. Does it make you angry? She asked. It made me better at reading rooms, he said. When you lose one way of taking in the world, you find others. She thought about that. Her own version of it. The years of making herself quieter, smaller, more observant, because her home was unpredictable, and observation was the only early warning system she had. She had found others, too. I noticed you humming earlier, he said. She blinked. I do that when I'm not thinking about it. What was it? She had to think. Clair de Lune. Debussy. My mother used to play it on a record player she kept in the kitchen. She paused. She's been gone for 13 years. Something passed across Luca's face that was not pity. It was the expression of a person who has carried something heavy for a long time and recognizes the weight when they see it on someone else. Get some sleep, he said. We have more to discuss tomorrow. He walked back toward his study. She watched him go, It was only later, lying in the dark of the guest room, that she realized he had been standing outside the bathroom door the entire 40 minutes, and that she had never once felt like she was being watched. She had felt, inexplicably, like she was being kept safe. On the third morning, Dante Greco brought her a phone. Not to keep, just to use. He set it on the breakfast table in front of her and said, "Someone is asking for you." His voice was flat in the way of a man delivering news he did not choose. The call was from Kayla. Kayla, who had been Serena's best friend since the 3rd grade. Kayla, who had stood in the church hallway in a sage green bridesmaid dress and not known what to say. Kayla, whose voice now came through the phone, shaking and strange. "Serena, something happened. I need to tell you before you hear it somewhere else." "Tell me." "Brandon went to the police. He told them you left voluntarily with Luca Carbone. He filed a statement saying you were in a relationship with Carbone before the wedding, that you and Carbone planned this together." Serena put down her coffee cup. "He's saying I helped my father steal from the Carbone family," Kayla continued, "and that you and Carbone are now—" She stopped. "Serena, there are reporters outside your apartment. Brandon gave them your name." After she hung up, she sat at the breakfast table for a long time. Nora refilled her coffee without saying anything. Luca arrived at the table 10 minutes later. Dante was already there. She could tell from the way they were both positioned, slightly angled, slightly tense, that they already knew. "He's trying to make me look complicit," Serena said. "If I'm the criminal, your people don't come after him. If I'm your partner, the police think I'm unreachable." "Yes," Luca said. "So he gets away. Unless we build the alternative narrative first." Luca set his own phone on the table. "Which requires you to cooperate formally with my attorney. On record. Full account of everything your father told you. Everyone you met through Brandon. Every conversation. It will protect you legally." He looked at her steadily. "It will also mean that everything you tell us goes into the case, including things about your father that are difficult." Serena looked at the table. 9 years her father was likely facing. More, if more charges were added. The man who had used her grandmother's money, who had put her in this room, who had also taught her to ride a bicycle in an empty parking lot at 6 in the morning, because that was the only time he could borrow a bike, who had cried at her college graduation in a way he tried to hide. "Okay," she said. "Let's start." She did not know that Brandon, at that same moment, 3 miles away, was sitting across a table from 2 FBI agents and offering them a recording of Serena's voice, a recording she had never consented to make. Luca's attorney was a woman named Claire Ashworth, who wore suits the color of storm clouds and had the specific energy of someone who had never lost a case she cared about. She arrived at the Brookline house at 2 in the afternoon and laid everything out on the long dining room table in under 10 minutes. Printed transcripts, timestamps, a digital audio file. "Brandon Holt gave the FBI 3 recordings," Claire said. "Each one is a phone call between you and your father over the past 18 months. In 2 of them, your father mentions wire transfers and account codes. You do not respond. You either change the subject or go quiet. But the prosecution's argument will be that your silence was tacit awareness." Serena listened. "In the 3rd recording," Claire continued, "your father says, and I am quoting, 'The Carbone account won't be touched until after your wedding, I promise.' Your response is, 'Dad, I don't want to know about this.'" End of that portion of the call. The dining room was silent. "I said I didn't want to know," Serena said. "That means I didn't know. It means you suspected. Claire said, not unkindly, and chose not to push. A prosecutor could argue deliberate ignorance. Serena's jaw tightened. She looked at the printed transcript in front of her. Her own words, her own voice, stripped of every context. Stripped of how sick she felt every time her father called. Stripped of the 2 years she had spent trying to convince herself that the vague wrongness she always felt around his finances was her anxiety, not her instincts. She asked him to stop, Luca said. Claire looked at him. In the transcript, she says, "I don't want to know about this." That is not a woman who is in on it. That is a woman who has been trying not to know for years because she loves her father, and it was easier. His voice was quiet, certain. That is the argument. Claire studied him for a moment. That is a viable argument, she said, if we can support it with her full account, voluntarily given, with no legal requirement to do so. She turned back to Serena. Which is why I am here. Serena looked at the transcripts, at Brandon's name on the evidence log, at her own voice used as a weapon against her by the only man who had ever made her feel chosen. She thought about the note in the bathroom. The door you came through is not the only door. She picked up Claire's pen. "Tell me everything you need," she said. What she did not know was that in 31 days, those words, her voluntary cooperation, fully documented, would be the only thing standing between her and a federal indictment. And that Luca Carbone had known this was coming for 72 hours before Claire arrived. They worked until 11. Claire left at 9 with 2 legal pads of notes and a list of follow-up items. Dante disappeared to make calls. Nora left a plate of food on the kitchen counter and went to bed. The house settled into the kind of quiet that large houses make. Boards contracting, pipes ticking, the sound of space being itself. Serena sat at the kitchen counter with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. She was thinking about the 3rd recording, her own voice saying, "I don't want to know about this." She had said it in the kitchen of her apartment on a Tuesday evening in March, standing at her stove making pasta, and her father had gone quiet, and then said sorry and changed the subject, and she had let him. She had been so grateful when he changed the subject. She had been grateful for the excuse not to push. She had known, not the details, not the amounts, but the shape of it. Luca came into the kitchen. He went to the counter, opened a cabinet, took out a glass, and poured 2 fingers of something amber. He set a second glass in front of her without asking. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "Not what, but something." He sat down on the stool across from her. "Yes," he said. "You knew I knew. I suspected you had chosen not to know. That is different." She looked at the glass he had poured. "Is it?" "One is fear," he said. "The other is crime. You were afraid of your father being the thing you already half believed he was. That is not the same as being complicit in it." She picked up the glass and took a small sip. It was warm all the way down. "How did you know about the car bomb?" she asked. "You read the file." It was in the background on a news archive Dante printed. 2005, bombing on Commonwealth Avenue. No suspects charged. She looked at him. "You were the son. You were there." He looked at the glass in his hand. "My father survived because he was 30 seconds late," he said. "He always ran late. His entire life, his lateness irritated everyone who loved him. That night it kept him alive." A pause. "I had already started the car. I was pulling out of the garage when it went off." Serena did not say anything for a long moment. "Claire de Lune," she said finally. He looked up. My mother used to play it because she said it sounded like the kind of peace you practice for, she said. Not peace that happens to you. Peace you build toward. Something crossed his face that she had not seen before. Not the controlled calculation, not the watchfulness. Something older. He did not answer, but he did not leave either. They sat in the kitchen until after midnight, and in the morning, she found a second note under her door in Nora's handwriting. He hasn't stayed up past 10 in 4 years, just so you know. Dante found it on day 6. He brought it to Luca first. Protocol. But Luca told him to tell Serena directly, because she deserved to hear it without it being filtered through anyone else's reaction first. Serena noticed the fact that he had thought to do it that way. She filed it alongside the shoes, the bathroom door, the kitchen at midnight. Dante sat across from her in the library and set a single printed page on the desk between them. Brandon Holt gave the Moran organization 18 months of intelligence, he said. Some of it came from your father. Some of it came from conversations he recorded through your phone. Your phone, which he had access to twice during your relationship when you asked him to update the software. He paused. He also recorded conversations between you and people at your school, parents, the school principal. At least 2 of those conversations were sold. Serena stared at the page. He was recording me without my knowledge, she said. Yes. For 18 months. Yes. And the information he sold, what did it do? Dante's jaw moved. Some of it was financial. Some of it was used to identify 2 men employed by this organization who were operating under civilian cover. Those 2 men were killed in separate incidents 8 months ago. The room contracted. People died, Serena said. That information originated from your father's contact network, Dante said carefully, which Holt accessed through surveillance of your communications. You were not a source. You were a channel he used without your knowledge or consent. It was the same distinction Claire had made. Fear versus crime. Victim versus participant. Serena understood the distinction perfectly, and it did not make her feel any better. She walked to the window. The October garden below was full of bare branches and the last of the red leaves. She pressed 2 fingers to the cold glass. 2 people were dead because a man had smiled at her across a bar 14 months ago, and she had thought, finally, someone is staying. I need to give a full statement to the FBI directly, she said. Not through Claire. Not through this house. Me, directly, on record. That is, Dante stopped. I know it's complicated for this organization. She turned from the window. I don't care. 2 people are dead, and I was the instrument without knowing it. The least I can do is make sure every piece of information I have is on record in the right place. She met his eyes. Tell Luca, she said, and tell him I'm not asking permission. He was not happy. She had expected that. What she had not expected was the specific quality of his unhappiness, which was not the cold authority she had seen in the church, not the careful distance of the dining room table. This was something unguarded, something close to fear. You walk into an FBI field office voluntarily, he said, and you become part of an open federal investigation that I cannot protect you from. I don't need you to protect me from the consequences of doing the right thing. You need someone to protect you from the consequences of becoming a target for the Moran organization, which is what happens the moment your name appears on a federal cooperation agreement. They were standing in the hallway outside the library. She had not planned to have this conversation in the hallway, but he had caught her on the way to Dante's office, and she had not backed up. I know what's at stake, she said. Do you? It was not a question. 2 people died because of information that moved through me, she said. I didn't know. I couldn't have known, but I know now, and that changes what I'm responsible for. I can't sit in this house and let Claire manage my cooperation like a PR problem. She kept her voice steady. I'm going to the FBI. What I am asking from you is whether you will help me do that safely, not whether I have your permission. Silence. Luca looked at her for a long moment. She held his gaze. She was aware that this was the first time she had met him head-on, without flinching. She was also aware, in some distant corner of her brain, that she had stopped being afraid of him somewhere around day 4 and had not fully registered the shift. If you go in, he said, you tell them about your father's account codes. You tell them about Holt. You tell them about Brandon. All of it. Yes. And you do not mention this house, this organization, or anything you have seen or heard here. She paused. I won't lie, she said. I am not asking you to lie. I am asking you to answer only what you are asked. He held her gaze. There is a difference. You know that there is a difference. She thought about it for 3 seconds. Yes, she said. I know that. He nodded once. Then I will have Dante make the arrangements. He turned to walk away, stopped. You will also have 2 of my people outside the building the entire time. She started to object. He looked back at her once, just once, and she saw in his face something that was not command. It was the expression of a person who has decided something privately and is not yet ready to say it aloud. She let him have the 2 people outside. The FBI conference room smelled like coffee and recycled air. Serena sat across from Special Agent Diana Torres and spent 4 hours telling the truth. Not a version of it. Not the version that protected her. The whole thing, from the moment she realized her father's finances made a sound she couldn't name, to the dinner with Derek Holt, to the recordings Brandon had made, to every piece of information she could give them. She told it in order. She answered follow-up questions without redirecting. When Agent Torres asked about the Carbone family, she answered exactly what she had been asked. No more. It was the hardest 4 hours of her life. Not because of the fear, not because of the legal exposure, but because telling the truth about her father, out loud, on record, to a federal agent who was writing it all down, was an act of severance she couldn't undo. She was testifying against the only parent she had left. She was turning the full weight of law and consequence toward a man who had taught her to ride a bike in an empty parking lot at 6 in the morning. She did it anyway. When it was over, she sat in the hallway outside room 4B and looked at the floor for a long time. Agent Torres came out a few minutes later and sat down in the chair beside her. Not across from her, beside her. It was a small choice. It landed heavily. I want to tell you something, Torres said. Off the record. Serena looked up. What you just did in there is one of the harder things I've seen someone do in this building, Torres said. And I have seen a lot. You could have lawyered up. You could have given us the minimum. You could have protected yourself and answered nothing. A pause. You chose not to. That matters. Serena thought about the note in the bathroom. The door you came through is not the only door. My mother used to say that the truth is always the lighter thing to carry, Serena said. I spent 14 months carrying everything else. I'm tired. Torres nodded. We'll be in touch. You're not a target. You're a witness. Outside the federal building, on the sidewalk, she found Dante leaning against a black SUV with 2 coffees. He handed her one without speaking. Across the street, at the corner, a man in a gray coat watched her come out. Not Luca's people. Dante clocked him immediately, stepped slightly in front of her without breaking stride. Serena didn't see the man, but she felt Dante shift, and she understood that something had just started that was not finished yet. The man in the gray coat was named Victor Moran. He was 61 years old, the operational head of the Moran family's Boston interests, and he had been watching the Voss situation develop for 3 weeks with the specific patience of a man who has never once lost a long game. He had let Brandon run his operation. He had let Gerald Voss drain the Carbone accounts. He had waited. He did not wait because he was kind. He waited because he wanted to see where Serena would go. She had now cooperated with federal investigators. She had given them Brandon, given them Gerald, given them the full shape of the surveillance operation. She had done it voluntarily, cleanly, and completely, which meant she was not afraid of the law. What Victor Moran needed to know was whether she was afraid of him. Nora found out about the gray coat man through a source she had cultivated over 19 years of working for a family that lived inside information. She came to Luca at 8 that evening with a name and an address and the kind of expression she reserved for things that could not wait until morning. Luca called Dante in. Then he called Claire. Then he sat alone in his study for 1 hour. At 9, he went to Serena's room and knocked. She opened the door in borrowed clothes, a blue sweatshirt and jeans, her hair loose, her feet bare. She looked, in that moment, exactly like herself, and nothing like the woman in the rented wedding dress. Victor Moran had someone watching the federal building today, he said. He knows you gave testimony. He knows your name is now attached to the federal case. She absorbed this. What does that mean for me? It means you are a loose thread he would prefer to tie off. He met her eyes. Which means you cannot go back to your apartment. Not yet. She nodded once. She did not fall apart. She looked at the window for a moment, then back at him. How long? Until the federal case builds enough protection around you that it is more dangerous for him to move against you than to leave you alone. He paused. Weeks, maybe more. She looked at the borrowed sweatshirt, at the room that was not hers, in a house she had arrived at in a wedding dress 6 days ago. Okay, she said. I want to also tell you something, he said. What you did today at the federal building, the way you did it. He stopped. That was unusual. She had not seen him stop before finding words. Nora told me, Serena said quietly, that you've been standing outside doors. She held his gaze. I see you, Luca. You don't have to stop. There was a piano in the east room. Serena found it on the 8th morning, on her way back from the kitchen with her coffee. A door she had assumed was a closet turned out to open into a long, narrow room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on 3 walls and an upright piano against the 4th. The piano was clearly not decorative. The keys were worn in the way of an instrument that had been played regularly for decades. The wood had the particular sheen of something handled with care. She sat down on the bench. She had not touched a piano in 7 months. She had not played since before the engagement, since the accumulation of wedding planning and school schedules and trying to be the kind of person Brandon seemed to want had slowly crowded out everything that was just hers. She played 3 scales. Her hands remembered. Then she played Clair de Lune. Not perfectly. She had never played it perfectly. Her left hand had always been slightly behind, the phrasing a little cautious in the harder passages. Her mother used to say that was fine. Music that was lived in sounded different from music that was performed, and she preferred the lived-in kind. She played it through once, then again. She did not hear Luca in the doorway until the second piece ended. He was standing with his shoulder against the frame, his coffee forgotten in his hand, watching her with an expression she had not seen before on his face. Open, unguarded. The way a person looks when they have been caught by something they did not plan for. "My mother played this room," he said. Serena's hands rested on the keys. "She died when I was 17, he said. Illness. She played until 3 weeks before the end because she said silence was the only thing she was afraid of." He looked at the piano. "I kept the room exactly as she left it. I haven't played since she died." Serena looked at the worn keys under her hands, the sheen on the wood that only came from regular playing. 22 years of regular playing. "She was the last person who played this instrument," Serena said, "until this morning." A long silence, not uncomfortable, the kind of silence that is full rather than empty. "The zipper," Serena said. He looked at her. "On the wedding dress. You pulled it up before I came downstairs for dinner on the first night. You didn't have to. You could have sent Nora." She held his gaze. "You've been careful with me since the beginning. I just didn't understand what I was seeing." Luca looked at the piano for a long moment. "My mother would have liked you," he said. It was the most unguarded thing she had ever heard him say, and the moment she understood that she was not going back to her apartment when this was over. Not because she was afraid to leave, because she did not want to. Dante found the second file on a Tuesday, not in any digital account. In an envelope taped behind the false back of a filing cabinet in Gerald Voss's home office. An office Serena had signed papers to allow the investigation team to search. The envelope was addressed in her father's handwriting to a name she did not recognize. Inside were 16 pages of documentation and a separate sealed letter addressed to Serena. Dante brought it to her unopened. She carried it to the east room and sat down at the piano bench to read it alone. She did not open the sealed letter first. She read the documentation first, because she had learned, in the past 2 weeks, to take the hard information before the emotional information, because it gave her somewhere factual to stand. The documents were a full account. Not of the theft. She already had that. An account of Gerald Voss's debt, when it started, how it grew, and the name of the organization that had initially leveraged him into working for the Moran family. That name was Derek Holt. Her father had not chosen this. He had been targeted. Holt had found his gambling debts 2 years before Serena ever met Brandon, had offered a solution, and then made certain the solution required more and more cooperation, until her father was in so deep that stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. It did not excuse what he did, but it reordered it. She opened the sealed letter. It was 2 pages, her father's handwriting, slightly unsteady, the way it looked when he wrote late at night. The first paragraph was apology. She read it once and moved on. Not because she did not feel it, because she could not afford to feel it right now. The second paragraph was information. An account number in a Cayman bank, accessible only with a specific code, containing $47,000 that he had moved there in the last 8 months. Her grandmother's money, kept separate. He had not spent it. He had been waiting, he wrote, for a way to give it back to her without explaining where it came from. The third paragraph was 1 sentence. Luca Carbone is not a good man in the conventional sense, but he is an honest one. More than I ever managed to be. Don't be afraid of the wrong things. Serena sat with the letter in her hands for a long time. She folded it, put it in the pocket of the borrowed sweatshirt, and walked down the hall to Luca's study. She knocked once. When he opened the door, she held up the letter. "My father left me something," she said. "I think you should read the last paragraph." He read it. He read the last paragraph twice, which she noticed because she was watching him the same way he had once watched her, reading the things that happened in the space around the words. He folded the letter and held it for a moment. "Your father," he said, "spent 30 years making poor choices in a row, and then spent 8 months trying to correct one of them." He handed the letter back. "He put the money aside for you the moment he understood what Holt had done through your relationship. He may have suspected Brandon before you did." "That doesn't—" "I know it doesn't fix it," he said. "I am not saying it does. I am saying it tells you something about who your father is underneath the poor choices." He paused. "It is possible to love someone and be furious with them and grieve them and forgive them and still hold them accountable. Those things are not mutually exclusive." Serena sat down in the chair across from his desk. She had spent 2 weeks in this house. She had arrived holding dying flowers and wearing a rented dress. She had come in as a debt, a problem, a name attached to a theft she didn't commit. Somewhere in the past 14 days, she had become a person who sat in the chair across from the most dangerous man in Boston and said what she thought, without checking first whether it was safe to say it. She did not know when that had shifted. She suspected it had been gradual. The shoes, the piano room, the kitchen at midnight. "I want to do something," she said. "When this is over." He waited. "There are children in the school district where I teach, 5 schools, maybe 6, who have family situations like mine. Not criminal necessarily, just unstable. Fathers who are present and absent in the same year. Mothers who work 3 jobs. Kids who come in on Mondays with the particular tiredness of a weekend spent managing adults." She looked at him. "I want to start a music program. A real one. Not a once-a-week elective. A dedicated after-school program. Instruments provided. No cost. Staffed by real musicians. Something that gives those kids a room where they are not anyone's caretaker. Where they just get to be inside something beautiful." Luca looked at her for a long moment. "That is a significant undertaking," he said. "I know. It requires funding, space, legal structure, relationships with school administration. I know. I can help with the funding," he said. Simply. No negotiation, no condition. She looked at him. "I'm not asking you to fund it," she said. "I'm asking if you think it's a good idea." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "I think it is an extraordinary idea." He paused. "And I am going to fund it anyway." The federal indictment of Brandon Holt came down on a Friday morning in early December. Serena heard about it from Agent Torres, who called her directly. 31 counts. Organized surveillance, conspiracy, sale of classified material, and complicity in the deaths of 2 federal informants. Brandon had tried to negotiate a plea at the last moment, had offered information on the Moran family's full network in exchange for reduced sentencing. Victor Moran had been arrested 4 days earlier on a separate but related charge set, in a coordinated operation that Serena later understood had been running in parallel to her own case all along. The Moran organization's Boston operations were effectively ended. The men who had watched the federal building were in custody. The prosecutor's recommendation, 18 to 22 years. No early release without exceptional circumstances. Serena took the call standing at the window of the East Room, looking out at the December garden. Bare trees, gray sky, the first frost still on the grass. She listened to everything Torres told her and said thank you and hung up. She played Claire de Lune. She played it slowly, more carefully than she usually did, with attention to every note and every rest. Her mother had told her the rests in music were not the absence of music. They were music. The moment of breath between phrases, the preparation for what came next. She played it through twice. Nora knocked and opened the door halfway. "There's someone on the phone for you," she said. Her voice was careful. "Your father." Serena's hands went still on the keys. She sat for 12 seconds. "I'll take it in here," she said. The call lasted 9 minutes. Her father's voice was hoarse. He said sorry 6 times. She counted. She let him say it. She did not tell him the sorries were enough. They were not enough, and they both knew it. But she listened. She told him that his letter had been read and received. She told him that the money was going to be used for something good. She did not tell him what. Before she hung up, she said, "I love you, Dad. That's not the same as saying we're okay. But I love you." He cried. She sat in the piano room for a long time after the call ended. Luca appeared in the doorway. He did not speak. He crossed the room, sat down on the bench beside her, not close, just present, and placed his hands in his lap. She looked at his hands for a moment. Then she began to play again, quietly. And he stayed exactly where he was. 6 weeks after the wedding that did not happen, Serena Voss wore a dress again. Not white. A deep blue, borrowed from a section of Nora's closet that turned out to contain several decades' worth of clothing, collected from the lost and found of a household that had seen a lot of people come and go. The occasion was the winter fundraiser for the Brookline Children's Arts Initiative, a new nonprofit, legally incorporated 3 weeks prior. Its founding director, 1S Voss, formerly of the Boston Public School District. The event was held in a rented gallery space in the South End. 60 guests, most of them school administrators, a few city council representatives, several music educators, and one very large man in a black suit who stood near the back and said very little and did not bring a gift, because he had already arranged the initial $200,000 operating grant 2 weeks earlier. Serena gave a 7-minute speech. She spoke about her mother's record player and the specific piece of music in an unstable kitchen. She spoke about the children she had taught for 4 years who came in on Mondays wearing the exhaustion of adults. She spoke about the door you came through not being the only door. She did not explain where the line came from. She did not cry during the speech. She had decided she would not cry during the speech. Afterwards, standing near the wine table, she cried a little. Kayla handed her a napkin. "You did that," Kayla said. "We did that. I contributed the napkin." Serena laughed, a real one, the kind that came up fast and caught her off guard. Later, near the end of the evening, she found herself near the back of the gallery where Luca had been standing. He was looking at one of the student art pieces mounted on the wall, a watercolor of a piano, painted by a 9-year-old from the Dorchester pilot program, slightly wonky in proportion, but luminous in color. "She painted this last week," Serena said. "First week of the program. Her teacher said she hadn't spoken in class since September." Luca looked at the painting. "She spoke this week," he said. "Yes." He turned to her. He looked at her, the particular way he had always looked at her, the way that read what was not being said, the way that had made her feel visible for the first time in more years than she could count. "I have something for you," he said. From his jacket pocket he took a small box, not a ring box, flat, rectangular, the size of a bracelet case. Inside was a thin silver chain. On it, a small silver clasp, the exact mechanism of a zipper pull, cast in silver, polished smooth. "The door you came through," he said quietly, "was not the door I expected either." He held her gaze. "Stay. Not as a debt to be settled or a witness to be protected. Stay because you want to." She looked at the bracelet in the box for a long moment. Then she looked at him. "I already am," she said. Spring came to Brookline the way it always does, too slowly and then all at once. By March, the Brookline Children's Arts Initiative had 3 school partnerships, 11 volunteer instructors, 46 enrolled students, and a waiting list. A journalist from the Globe did a short feature on it. A small piece, page B4, with a photo of Serena sitting at a piano beside a 10-year-old boy who was playing his first full scale. The headline was, "Music Teacher Turns Difficult Year into New Beginnings for Kids." Serena read it in the kitchen of the Brookline house, where she had been living, officially by choice, with a room that was actually her room now, since December. She had gone back to her apartment twice to collect things. The third time, she had called her landlord. Her grandmother's $47,000 had been officially recovered through the federal case. She had put $40,000 into the nonprofit's instrument fund. The remaining $7,000 she kept in a savings account for the first time in her adult life, for no specific reason except that it felt like a margin, like the small amount of space between what you need and what you have that lets you breathe. Gerald Voss began his sentence in January. He would be eligible for review in 9 years. Serena had not visited yet. She was not ready. She was not sure she would ever be fully ready, and she had decided that not being ready was allowed. Brandon Holt was formally sentenced in February, 18 years. She did not go to the sentencing. She taught a lesson to a 7-year-old who was learning hot cross buns and was enormously proud of herself, and that felt like the better use of those 2 hours. Luca had dinner with her most evenings. On the evenings he did not, because his work was his work, and she had never asked him to change it. Nora and she ate together and talked about things that had nothing to do with any of the rest of it. Books, the garden, the specific satisfaction of a good soup. She wore the silver bracelet every day, not because he had given it to her, because of what it meant, that the door you came through can become a threshold for something else entirely, that the worst arrival of your life can become the beginning of the truest part of it. One Tuesday morning, she was playing Clair de Lune in the East Room when she heard him stop outside the door. She kept playing. He came in and sat on the bench beside her. When she finished, he said, "Marry me." Not a question, but not a command either. An offer, open-handed. She finished the last chord. "Ask me again in the spring," she said. He looked at her with the particular patience of a man who had learned that the best things are not rushed. "I already am," he said. "Every morning." She smiled, the real kind, unguarded, the one that came up fast. "Then I'll answer you every morning," she said. "Until one morning I say yes." She paused. "Soon." She said yes on the first warm Sunday in April, not because he asked. He had stopped asking in the formal sense. It had become a morning ritual, soft and unhurried, a daily small thing that they both knew the answer to already. She said yes on a Sunday because she woke up and the light was coming through the curtains at the specific angle that made the East Room piano look gold, and she could hear Nora in the kitchen below, and she felt, for the first time in her life without any modification, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She went downstairs. He was reading at the kitchen table. She poured her coffee and sat across from him. "Yes," she said. He looked up. My answer is yes, she said. Today. He closed the book. He looked at her for a moment with the same expression he had worn in the gallery, in the kitchen at midnight, in the hallway outside the piano room. The expression that had always been there, that she had been learning to read since October. Okay, he said. And then, do you want eggs? She laughed. The wedding was small. Spring, at the Brookline house. 40 people. The east room open to the garden. The piano played by a 15-year-old girl from the arts program who had been reluctant to perform in public until 2 weeks before the ceremony and had practiced every afternoon until she was ready. The girl played Claire de Lune. Serena walked in wearing a dress she had bought herself, not rented, the color of the lining of a cello case, a deep, warm amber. No veil. No borrowed flowers. On her left wrist, the silver zipper bracelet. Kayla cried through the whole thing. Dante stood in the back and pretended he was not moved. Nora wore a rose-pink dress and sat in the front row and told everyone she had seen this coming from the third day. Gerald Voss watched it through a photograph. Serena had sent it to him, with a note that said only, I thought you should see. Here is what this story knows to be true. The person who leaves you at the altar was never the right door. The worst day of your life is not a judgment on your worth. It is simply the last day of a story that was always going to end, so that the real one could begin. Peace is not something that happens to you. It is something you practice toward, one morning at a time, one door at a time, until one day you realize you have been living inside it for months without noticing. If you were Serena, standing in that church with the dying flowers and the empty aisle, would you have walked out of the room with him? Or would you have stayed frozen at the door? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe that love always finds the right door, leave a yes below. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell. Part 2 is coming, and it begins the morning after the wedding. New chapters, new doors. Love always wins here. I will see you next time.